Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. So what I'd like to do is show you how to determine the midpoint between 2 points on a number line. This is going to be the first video in a couple when we're talking about the midpoint between 2 points as well as their lengths. So there's something important to understand about the midpoint. The midpoint is going to be the point that is exactly in the middle between our 2 points. Basically, what that means is our two segments, our segment lengths, so if here's a point A and here's a point B, if we have that point C that's right in the middle, that means the length of A to B is equal to the length of C to B, right? So the midpoint basically is right in the middle. It's equal on both sides. Now, that can be very, very helpful, especially when we're dealing with something on a number line. That's kind of fairly basic. I just kind of chose some fairly easy ones. But it gets a little difficult when we have a number line, but just not really like intervals to be able to determine where exactly that middle point is. So in this point here, you can see I'm at, here I have a number line. And you can see I go from 0 to 2, and then from 0 to -2. Well, hopefully it should be pretty honest that 0 is exactly in the middle, right? But I just want to make sure, I want to choose this example so you can see there's a couple things that are going on here. First of all, the distance from here to here is 2. Again, distance, not positive or negative. Distance from there to there is 2. And then from here to here is also 2. So the midpoint is right in the middle. So I'm going to say my midpoint, I don't know, midpoint? Midpoint is 0. All right? Now, there's a couple other things, though, I want you to understand as far as on this. The distance from -2 to 2 is equal to 4, right? And if you take 4 and divide it by 2, because we have kind of 2 points, so if you find the middle between those two, you're going to, again, get 2. Also, if you were to take -2 plus +2, you would equal 0, which divided by 2 is going to equal 0, which is our midpoint. So that might kind of make a little bit of sense. But basically what I'm trying to do is, understanding the midpoint is very helpful and very important, especially on an easy problem like this. But kind of understanding these two other characteristics is going to be really helpful for these two other problems. So in this example, I want to kind of show you, all I did was basically take this exact thing and move everything over 1 unit. So now it's just not as obvious that 0 is the midpoint, because now 0 is not the midpoint. You can see, hopefully from here, you can see that 1 is the midpoint. But I want to kind of show you again the information that's kind of helpful with this. First of all, the distance from here to here is 2. The distance from 1 to 3, again, is 2. The distance from 3 to 1, so if you were to find the distance, which would be 3 minus -1, right? So find the distance. That's going to equal 4. If you take that distance 4 and divide it by 2, what that's going to do is if you take the 2 distance, right, you have the distance from your 2 points. And if you divide that by 2, that's basically breaking them up into 2 equal segments. That's going to give you the distance from each point to its midpoint. So one way to find the midpoint is to find the distance between your 2 points, divide that by 2, then just take that distance from either endpoint to the midpoint. The other way is what we could also work in is taking -1 plus 3 equals -2. Then take -2 divided by, I'm sorry, that's +2. +2 divided by 2 equals 1. And that's going to give you the midpoint that's actually on the line. So let's kind of use this to our advantage here. Let's kind of see how this can kind of work. All right? So basically, the midpoint formula is going to follow off of this. And let's actually go through this. Let me use a blue. So the midpoint formula is going to say, if I have 2 points, A and B, and I want to find my midpoint, all I simply need to do is take A plus B divided by 2 equals my midpoint C. Okay? And the other thing important about that is these 2 segments then are going to be congruent. They're going to be equal in length. All right, so let's go ahead and use this midpoint theorem, our midpoint rule, to go ahead and figure out the length of the midpoint for my first segment, which is 6 and 28. So here I can do 6 plus 28, which equals 34. Then divide that by 2 is going to equal 17. So you can see if I was going to create on a number line, the midpoint between 6 and 28 is 17. Now let's make sure this makes sense. Between 6 and 17 is 11. And between 17 and 28 is 11. So therefore, you can see that those two are congruent, and we did our math correctly. In this example, we can do the exact same thing here. We can do let's actually do that other process real quick. I could also find the distance between these two. So therefore, I do 28 minus 6, which is going to be 22. So that's the distance between both of them is 22. And if I divide by that by 2, that gives me 11. So 6 plus 11 is 17, or 28 minus 11 is also 17. So that's another way to get your midpoint. But for the rest of these problems, I'm just going to use the midpoint formula. So in this case, I could say here's my A, here's my B. And let's do C, D, E, and F. Just going to kind of give you some different names here. So in this example, I'll do -3 plus 17 divided by 2. -3 plus 17 equals 14 divided by 2, which is 7. Done. So you can see my midpoint is exactly at 7. And you can just do kind of some quick math. From there to there is 10, and from here to here is 10. Works out perfectly. Over in this case, I'll just do -17 plus -8 divided by 2. -17 plus -8 is going to be a -25 divided by 2. Obviously, 2 does not evenly divide into 25, so we'll just leave it just like that. No really mixed numbers. I don't like mixed numbers. Improper fractions is perfectly fine. But a lot of times when we're doing midpoint, not every single distance is going to be divisible by 2. So leaving it as a fraction is perfectly fine. And then what would not be a math problem without some fractions? Just to make sure we brush up on this, 1/3 plus 2/5 divided by 2. Just make sure, guys, when you're adding fractions, you get common denominators. So therefore, I need to multiply this by 5 over 5, and here by 3 over 3. So therefore, I get 5/15 plus 6/15 divided by 2. That equals 21/15 divided by 2. Then I can multiply by my reciprocal on the top and bottom, times 1/2 times 1/2. That multiplies into 1, and I'm left with 21/30. And then I can reduce that fraction, so I could divide by 3 on the top and the bottom, and I would get 7/10. So just want to make sure we can do the easy ones, right? But understanding the midpoint formula should be able to take you to even one just with fractions. Because even though it looks, it's a little more difficult numbers, the process is exactly the same. So there you go, ladies and gentlemen. That is your introduction to the midpoint between 2 points. Thanks.